A pretty bleak Thursday for the markets. We have all the shares on the top 40 under pressure, and as Alicia said, really those resources stocks dragging the markets even lower, and just no good news out there at the moment.
Yeah, I'm afraid not, Stephen. Certainly it started in the US yesterday with that particularly bad set of jobs data, as well as the manufacturing data that we had out. So a really shocking set of non-farm payroll numbers in terms of the jobs data. So what we're seeing today is that some of those jobs numbers being adjusted, and what we might find is that tomorrow when we get the next set of jobs data, maybe the expectations have been lowered sufficiently that maybe they surprise on the upside again. But jokes aside, it really was quite a poor picture, and I think many of the leading indicators that we see in terms of confidence and expectation numbers continue to be downgraded, and yet the actual numbers are coming out below expectations, which really is quite a negative picture that is being painted out there. So I think what we're seeing today, as Alicia quite rightly pointed out, the American poor growth scenario at the moment overtaking concerns in Europe, particularly pertaining to Greece. So even though in Moody's downgraded Greece debt this morning, giving it sort of a 50-50 chance of a possible default there, is overshadowing that, and hence we see the dollar weakening this morning against the euro.
And yet you'd think that would be reflected in some of the commodity prices, but the resources stocks still very much under pressure.
Yeah, I think it's probably because it's not just the dollar that is now sort of assisting commodity prices, but rather that the fundamental demand for commodities is also under pressure, and that is why you see the resource stocks really leading the decline, obviously on our own markets, but also this morning it was in Asian markets. It was very much the same sort of story. So really red across the board, and really the only commodity that seems to be having a little bit of green is obviously gold, thanks to its safe haven status there.
Now, do you think the markets are reading all of this into the PMI numbers we saw out of China yesterday morning, because they also appear to be a little bit disappointing, just above 52, lowest in 9 months.
Yeah.
And of course that ISM reading in the United States last night, also quite dismal.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's this combination of the two forces in the world, the US and China, really expecting, everybody's expecting these two to pull the world out of the poor economic growth scenario. And if those two cannot actually produce the growth, there's really nowhere else to turn in terms of growth. Because, of course, in Europe, being the other powerhouse, the fiscal austerity that is required to actually meet the Greek and the other debt concerns that we've got in Europe will necessarily mean that growth in Europe cannot be anything of any sort to sort of assist the world economy. So with China and the US both coming out yesterday with poor manufacturing and jobs data, and the world scenario is just really looking quite bleak today. But as I say, we've had such a bipolar economy and world economy in particular in recent times, that when you have such particularly bad data, what you sometimes find is that the expectations are adjusted so negatively that the actual data might then next surprise on the upside, and who knows, maybe tomorrow then we've got a positive set of data relative to a much lower expectation, and who knows, we might actually have a rally again. So, but a lot of volatility. Really the undertone is negative, but that nothing stops us from having these little flurries once in a while, but the undertone is still negative. There's still a lot of concerns out there, and really not a rosy picture in the markets at all.
Well, just looking at the top 40, we have a retailer at either end of the top 40. At the top of the top 40, down by just 0.4%, Massmart. At the other end, we have ShopRite, down by 3.25%. Do you think that the markets are starting to read into this Walmart entry into South Africa, and how negative it might be for some of the other retailers? Because I don't see any other reasons for ShopRite being so weak.
I think you're quite right. I think it's not coincidental that those two are at the extreme ends of the top 40 performance today. Massmart, of course, will have a natural underpin to its share price because of the offer price at 148 Rand. So even if we've got a very negative day like today, you will necessarily have some strong underpin to its share price. And ShopRite probably one of the biggest targets in terms of the fallout that there will be from Walmart entering via Massmart. So ShopRite really see a lot of pundits looking at it. It's had very good performance, but it'll probably take some strain in the medium term. The other one that we also find quite interesting is Pick n Pay. Pick n Pay, you will recall, has had a very, very torrid time, to the extent that its share price has fallen so much that when the FTSE JSE Index Committee meets next week, we expect that they will announce that Pick n Pay will be dropped from the top 40 index because its market cap has fallen to such an extent that it falls into the category of automatic exclusion from the top 40 index. It's fallen to a rank of around 47, which qualifies for automatic exclusion from the top 40 index. So it's also indicative, I think, of not just the Pick n Pay woes, but also the particularly hard time that retailers have had in recent times. We expect Pick n Pay to be replaced by Associated or Azor in the top 40 index. So that to be expected to be announced only next week, because that committee only meets next Wednesday. But that's just a bit of a preview of what we expect to take place next week.
And of course, this will be good for Azor's share price potentially going forward, because it does mean that some of those tracker funds have to then start upping their holdings of Azor, isn't it?
Yes, most definitely. And also, Azor is not a stock that actually trades at very high liquidity. So in a stock that doesn't have a lot of liquidity, you could very well find that a stock that with low liquidity, if there's significant demand, which is exactly what you will find for top 40 trackers, you could actually find quite a bit of demand and therefore some extreme price movement. So we'll certainly be watching that one with interest over the next couple of days.
Now, we had a pretty dismal start to May, although that month ended okay for the JSE, because we saw quite a nice rally in the last week of May. It's been a dismal start to June as well, it looks like. And if you look back at May, we had equities ending the month up by, actually down by almost 1%, so underperforming all other asset classes for the month.
Yes, and if it wasn't for that rally towards the end, it would have been a much worse month. And if we just look sort of at the overall performance, that performance really was negatively affected by the performance of the resources, and in particular by oil stocks, Sasol in particular. On the positive side, we had quite interestingly good performance from companies that operate in Europe and whose share prices are sort of euro denominated. Now that obviously came on the back of euro weakness that we had. So almost in a bizarre way, we were the recipients or the net receivers of that euro weakness during the month of May. So at the top of the top 40 performer list during the month of May, we find companies like Richemont and Reinet and Mondi and Investec, sort of a mixed bag of companies that don't really have any other common theme other than the fact that their share prices are denominated either in euro or in pounds or in Swiss franc. And when you translate that back into South African rands, they actually outperformed some of their more local peers. At the bottom of the top 40 list, it's also then not surprising to find a good representation of most of the resources stocks. And I had a look through it, and you literally see, Implat's a platinum company. You see a gold company, Anglo Gold. You see Exxaro, representative of the iron ore, the ores in there. So really a good representation of the broad spectrum of the resources, and really indicative of what transpired during the month of May on the JSE.